It's time to talk more Denver Broncos football on the Our Lads Football Network for the OFN today. And if we're going to talk Denver Broncos football from now on, I guess Henry Chisholm is going to be the guy that we're going to talk to. Henry, thanks for doing this again.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been a couple months since we talked, so there's a lot to get through.
Perfect timing, too.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, even I think in the last 24 hours or so, Broncos cut Brandon McManus, who's been their kicker since 2014. Perfect 10 for 10 in the Super Bowl 50 run. 6 years as a captain, and kind of just out of nowhere cut him. Bring back their swing tackle from last year, Cam Fleming, who actually started 15 games and I thought played really well when he was in there. And then also added Tyler Lancaster, another depth piece. So yeah, I mean, busy couple of days. And then OTA started yesterday too. We get our first chance to see the team since Sean Payton took over on Thursday
That
tomorrow.
must have been
Which will be
big.
really exciting.
Yeah. Sean Payton running the sidelines. That's why it's cool to have these early videos where is it real? It's real, man.
It
He's
is real.
actually there. He's wearing Broncos attire, not Saints attire. I know the feeling as a Jet fan watching Aaron Rodgers out there in Jet attire. It's kind of freaky. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we talked about this with McManus too, I believe, because we
Mm-hmm.
just touched up on just the fact that I think it was his percentage last year. He had 3 misses between 20 and 39, even though he was perfect from 40 to
Mm-hmm.
49. But his 8 overall misses it was his worst percentage since 2017. And you did get the feeling that at some point, and you got a new head coach, that was he really shaky, or were they like, he's kind of, unless they draft somebody, he's still the veteran, the devil kind of deal. But
Mm-hmm.
apparently, look, Mars, the one that they're bringing in right now, as far as you know.
Yeah. So they brought him in for a tryout today. We'll see how that goes. Everybody saw him in the playoffs last year, 1 for 6 in 2 games on
Yeah,
extra points.
that's yeah.
So I like the idea of you bring him in for a tryout, basically tell him, hey, you need a good day with everybody watching if you're going to get this contract. Put a little pressure on him and see if he can handle it this time. Um, yeah, and you mentioned it's the devil in Brandon McManus, and I probably would have rolled it back with him at least for one more year. Um, so the percentage not good, 77.8. But you mentioned the 2 short misses; both of those were blocked, and so that's the kind of the conversation in Denver was it his fault for not kicking the ball high enough? Was it the terrible special teams unit's fault for not blocking the guys who actually got their hands on those kicks? Because I think there were only 4 or 5 kickers last year who had 2 blocks. So
Okay.
that'll knock the percentages down. There was one of the extra points he missed was just a terrible hold. And so that whole special teams unit was just so bad
Yes.
that it definitely dragged him down. The question is just how much did it drag him down? And apparently they think not too much because they said we'd rather replace him.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned, of course, new coach, and it's not just, of course,
Mm-hmm.
Peyton. It's the fact that Stooks, that's the new coordinator, and a lot of
The
times,
He was the last coordinator.
what was that?
He was the last coordinator.
Oh, he was the bad guy.
Yeah, so he was the bad guy. So they just got rid of him and then brought in Mike Westhoff as like I think assistant head coach. So he'll kind of be overseeing the special teams. And I'm blanking on the name of the guy who's the actual special teams coordinator. Um, Came over from the Jets also, worked with him before.
How old is Westoff now? Is he in his 70s?
75.
Yeah, he was really good at the time that he was in the league. He was awesome, but I guess he's too old to have the job full time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it just shows you that when you bring in a new coordinator, a new coach, uh, things are going to change. And why
Yep.
not? Just like when a new head coach or a new offensive coordinator comes in, they want a new quarterback. It makes sense unless he's a really good kicker, and if it's 5 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, but it's time. So, but I still thought that if they were going to make this move, why not go after maybe, and they could still do it, maybe go after a younger kicker.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do it in the draft. I know the kid from Michigan. I'm not sure where he is. I'm surprised he did
Yeah.
not get drafted. I don't think he got drafted, the kid from Michigan,
I don't think he did
which
either. There were a
surprised
couple
me.
kickers who did, but I don't think he was one of them.
Yeah. So, but anyway, That's one of the things to keep an eye on for Denver because, look, that has, as you know, as a Denver covering this team, this is not just last year. This has been a bad unit for like the last 5 or 6 years. This has not been good. And so I'm sure Sean Payton realized that. And it's like, look, I can't turn this team around if we don't at least start getting better special teams. And the face of the special teams is your place kicker, so he's out. All right. So no first round draft pick. No. Did they make any trades during the draft?
They did. So let's see. The first one, they traded up. So they had picks 67 and 68, I believe, going into the draft. It was the 4th and 5th pick of the 3rd round. They traded up from 68 to get to 63, maybe, I think, to draft Marvin Mims, who's their first pick. And then the more controversial trade was when they moved up for Riley Moss. So they picked up Riley Moss. Let's see, they got into the 3rd round for him, traded away a 4th round pick, but also I think traded away next year's 3rd round pick.
Oh, okay.
So value-wise, it was probably not a great deal, but it's Sean Payton. If he sees somebody he wants, he's going to go get him.
Well, to tell you the truth, considering they got bargains with their last 2 guys, it worked out because those guys, if they were drafted in the 3rd round or the 4th round with those picks that they gave away, nobody would have said anything. Those guys, because Skinner, I mean, I thought Skinner was a fringe, and even Arlett's had him graded as a potential first round draft pick.
Really?
And Forsythe was as high as a 5th rounder. So that has to make those trades, if you're justifying them, especially as a fan, it should make things a little bit easier for you.
Easily. Yeah. We all put together a list. So we do a live show during the draft at DNVR. And so we all have our list of guys who we really like in the draft. And I had a handful of them. Hunter Lepke was my favorite. Just such an awesome fullback out of North Dakota State. But on that list was J.L. Skinner. And so when when the Broncos drafted him in the 6th round, there was a quick wow, they took Henry's guy. Like, what do you have to say? So that was awesome. And I basically said, if they would have taken him with the Marvin Mims pick, I would have been thrilled. I wonder. He's a big safety, 6'4". He had the torn pec at the combine, right before the combine and the workouts, and so that probably was part of the reason he dropped. But I would have liked to have seen him run the 40-yard dash. I do wonder what that top end speed looks like. But with those long legs, it looks, on tape, it looks like he's able to get sideline to sideline just because of the long strides. He might not be so quick getting going, but once he is going, he can move. Yeah,
that starting off with Mims, the thing that you think about is because you look at him on tape and you look at his overall scouting notes, and you're like, well, wasn't this guy more productive at Oklahoma of all places? Well, that's because Riley is now in USC. I'm sure if Lincoln Riley was still at Oklahoma last year, Mims would have probably had 10 more touchdowns and probably have been an easy first-round draft pick. Maybe I'm wrong, but because the kid there's a lot to like about him. He's got the home run ability. He's got the 4.39 speed. He's got the footwork, the overall route running. He's got, and he can line up just about anywhere on the field, which is perfect for what Sean Payton wants to do.
Absolutely. And, you even go back farther when he was in high school, he has the all-time record for receiving yards, I think, in a season. I think it was 2,800 for the season, and then the career record for Texas high school football.
Yes.
So he has the season record nationally, which is unbelievable just for that senior year he put together. And the numbers they don't jump out at Oklahoma, but he was their leading receiver for all 3 years he was there. I think the first year he did it with 600 yards or something, which, again, isn't all that impressive, but he did the job. Then the crazy thing was, I was just going back and reading up, and one of the things that he said during fall camp last year was that if Lincoln Riley had stayed, he was going to transfer out.
Really?
Because he didn't like the way Lincoln Riley used him, which is just insane to me, because I totally agree with you. If Lincoln Riley's there, he's probably putting up 1,500 yards last year.
That's interesting. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
fact is, Broncos got themselves, especially when they traded up, they got the guy they wanted, and
Mhm.
that's going to be big. Now, let me ask you, because this is something we obviously touched up on, and that is the Patrick's coming back from injury.
Yep.
Hamler's always injured.
He
They
is.
bring in Callaway, so Peyton knows him, but
Mhm.
also the whole, more importantly, the Sutton Judy deal. Do you believe? First of all, what are your percentages? Is it 90% that both of them, is 100% that both of them will be here week one?
I think so. I will say I'm going to be much more confident saying anything. Yeah, and June 1 is the day. June 1 is the day because that's, again, you get to split that dead cap hit over 2 years. There's a chance that they're just holding on until they can make that move,
Okay.
just
Interesting.
because they're so tight up against the cap. So if they make it to June 2nd, I'm confident that they're going to be here. And in general, I'm confident. I think if there was a deal that was going to get done, it would have happened before the draft. I think, especially with the team just so short on draft capital, that would have made the most sense. And I also think their asking price is just too high. Or maybe it isn't too high, but there's nobody who's going to meet it. Because before the draft, they wanted a first round pick for Jerry Jeudy. They supposedly wanted something like a second round pick or a third and a player for Cortland Sutton, depending on where you look. But I do think that those are probably done. Um,
Okay.
June 1st is going to be a big day, though.
Okay.
That first
Good
2
to
days
know.
right after that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So, and look, if that's the case and Patrick's healthy, that could be
Mm-hmm.
a very impressive group. Matter of fact, an even deeper group of
Yep.
receivers that Russell Wilson had in Seattle. Russell had the big two, but he didn't have a tight end really, and he didn't have anything other than the big two. So that could make things that much more easier, and that's what you're going to have to make things as easy as possible for Russell, because you guys, Denver Broncos, this organization is invested in Russell. He's got to turn things around, and Peyton's the guy to do it. So, what before we move on, because that was the only skill position player that the team
Mm-hmm.
added out of their 5 draft picks. Do you think that with P. Ryan's being signed to hopefully be insurance for Williams, do you think they're pretty set now that they really don't have to make any other, you don't expect them to make any other moves as far as tight end, wide receiver, running back?
I'm confident about tight end receiver, and I should say there was another draft day trade that I didn't bring up. They traded from the 6th round to the 7th round and picked up Adam Troutman back from the Saints in that trade. So that, I mean, obviously Sean Payton ties, and I do think that kind of solidifies tight ends. With the receivers, like I said, I think they're done talking Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. The deal just didn't come through. Nobody was able to meet the price. The depth behind that is so good, you wouldn't consider adding anybody else to that room.
Okay.
Running back is the tempting one. You know, I asked George Payton before the draft where Javonte Williams was in his recovery.
Yes.
And he said, you know, we're confident he's going to come back at some point this season. We just don't know when, which is kind of what we expected, because it's a year out from the injury. Will be, I think, October 5th. And it's a multi-ligament knee tear, so you can't expect him to come back too much before that. But after the draft, Sean Payton went out of his way, wasn't even really asked about it, to say he's on track. We actually think he's going to be ready for the start of camp. So if that's true, and he made it sound like it's true,
Okay.
then they should be good at running back. If there are doubts, though, the depth behind Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine are it's very slim.
Yes.
You know, we've got Tony Jones Jr., who I think had 2 carries last year, has like 20 carries maybe in his career, something like that. Oh no, he had the bigger second year, but again, I think that was under 3 yards per carry when he got to like 120 yards or something. And Tyler Beatty, Jaleel McLaughlin, Jack Fitzpatrick, like I could see them adding one more back there.
Yeah, they added, now the 2 guys they did add were both former Saints, right? So Jones, as you mentioned, was with Peyton when he was with the Saints, and Burton, the fullback, was with the Saints.
Yep.
and Peyton as well. So yeah, I agree. I mean, Tony Jones Jr. as your number 3. I'm not. I would actually be a little bit more like, if I was hoping, and I'm a fan. I'd hope that Tyler Beatty actually
Mm-hmm.
developed because I know what Tony Jones Jr. is. I'm not so sure yet I know what Tyler Beatty could be because he was very productive as small stature he was. He had a very productive last year in the SEC. So you never know what you got there. But yeah, everything's not going to come together in 1 year anyway. But the trick is, of course, is to get Williams healthy for 2024 and then move on with him and the rest of his career. And like you said, they're set now at tight end after that trade for Troutman. And then the offensive line. Now, this is very important. This was one of the top needs going in. And then they add Forsythe, but that's it. So I was surprised by that. I don't know how many fans were surprised. I would think a lot. So talk about, I mean, does that mean, okay, with the signing of Fleming, they're set at tackle, and now it's just about what? Competition, and they feel apparently now they have enough competition on the roster, or do you think they'll add some more interior competition?
So they made the deal yesterday, bringing in Tyler Lancaster, a guy who, didn't play last year with an undisclosed injury, got cut during training camp off injured reserve. So who knows what that was, but has been kind of a rotational piece, back end rotational piece, but in the rotation. I could see them adding somebody like that to the offensive line. Not somebody who's saying like, oh, he's getting a roster spot, but somebody who could at least make some of the other guys sweat a little bit. But as it stands now, the starting five is probably pretty set in stone. With Lloyd Cushenberry at center being the one question mark. I think a lot of people in Denver expected the Broncos to take a center with one of their first two picks. I think they were 67 and 68. One of those two, I would have bet a good amount of money was going to be one of the centers. But Alex Forsythe, who they picked up in the 7th round, I think is a really good prospect. And I think 6-year starter, which is something you don't find. He was, I think, on maybe not an All-American list. No, he wasn't an All-American last year, but he was All Pac-12 once again. And they let him do stuff like he was checking plays at the line of scrimmage. Like they scored multiple touchdowns when he was up there flipping run plays, which you don't see Lloyd Cushenberry do that even in the NFL. So I do think there's a chance that he can unseat them. Outside of that, though, top 5 probably set. Okay. Cam Fleming comes back. He's your swing tackle. There's a couple of interesting guys that they brought in as undrafted free agents. Alec Palshowski, the tackle from Illinois, he actually was an All-American and has been a starter for a very long time. I wouldn't be surprised to see him compete. Quinn Bailey was on the team last year. He actually, I think, got a couple starts. They call him a tackle. They've called him a tackle for a while. Long-time practice squad player, but played at guard when he got in last year. I could see him getting in. They also have Kyle Fuller, who they brought in from Seattle. Older player, hasn't really seen the field all that much, but is kind of that fringe. Can he be your 9th offensive lineman? Lineman?
It is what it is.
So a little more competition there wouldn't hurt. You also have Luke Wattenberg, who was a 6th round pick.
5th round, yeah.
Yep. And he really struggled when he was on the field. And typically you say, he's a late round rookie. What do you expect? He was also 25 as a rookie, so the clock might be ticking, especially with the new coach. But he's there at center as well. So you have a little bit of competition. But Cam Fleming is your real good depth piece you feel good about.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think that, and we talked about it with the fact that, look, it's the same GM, Payton, who drafted Wattenberg. So if you can use a 5th round pick on a guy, you like him, and you think he has starting material, because centers can be drafted in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round and end up, starting as early as year 1 or 2. And then now with Forsythe there, I'd actually look at this, because Cushenberry's on his 4th year, and we know pretty much what he is, that if he ends up starting, what that's telling us is the other guys just have not been able to impress the coaching staff enough to start. And that's not a good thing. I think the Broncos coaching staff and the team would be much better off if one of those two guys, Wattenberg or especially maybe Forsythe, actually wins the job right away.
Absolutely. And, so I started covering the Broncos about a year ago. Before that, I was on the CU beat for 3 years. I was covering the Pac-12. I was voting on the all Pac-12 players, all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
And so Luke Wattenberg from Washington, Alex Forsythe from Oregon, I've seen plenty of those two.
Okay.
And first of all, I mean, Alex Forsythe is a legit football player, and I think the Broncos maybe made their best pick by bringing him in the 7th round. Not necessarily best player, but best value pick. So I'm right there with you. I think there's a good chance that they can beat out Lloyd Cushenberry, and I think that's why he was drafted, was to at least push him.
All right, so that's the offense. Now on defense, this is where this is where 3 of their 5 picks came.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one being Drew Sanders. And again, another good situation for the Broncos, because this is somebody that Arled's graded out as a potential late round, first round pick. Instead, he goes to round 3. And what's unique about him, and I'm sure the fans know by now, it's Alabama 1 year as an edge rusher, switches to Arkansas the next, and miraculously does a pretty good job as a Mike linebacker. That's a completely different role on defense that now gives the Broncos versatility. They got, hey, we got a guy that can do both. Where do we want to fit him? So what do they like about him the most based on what they've seen on film the last couple of years? How do you think he does best fit in?
So Sean Payton said he's an inside linebacker.
Okay.
We draft him to be an inside linebacker, like that 4-3 under type outside linebacker could also make some sense. That's a 3-4 defense. We like him an inside linebacker. Okay. So they made that clear. But he also said what he likes to do is go through and just set, he calls it the rusher tag. So anybody who can get after the quarterback, they'll just say, hey, he's an inside linebacker, but also we're circling his name for third downs, or putting together those sorts of packages. So when it comes to day-to-day practices, he's going to be out there with Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton working on figuring out how exactly to play inside linebacker, because they've moved him around so much. He is pretty raw doing either one of those things.
True.
But I do think on third downs, they're going to find a way to get him on the field. I mean, he had 9.5 sacks last year in the SEC. Like, you got to find a way to at least give him the opportunities to prove himself. And because you do have Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell on the roster, you're probably not seeing too much of Drew Sanders in the base defense. True. Those guys are probably in front of him.
Oh, yeah.
So while he will be an inside linebacker, and that's where they're going to be working him, I wouldn't be surprised if the only times you see him, at least in the first few weeks of the season, unless he forces their hand, will be on third downs. And that's probably that interior rush spot. So I guess still kind of an inside linebacker, but used mostly as a pass rusher.
And that's probably the same, too, on passing downs. Is that what we're looking for with last year's second-round pick, Benito? Do you think that's still where he is, or is there a chance that he can – because, look, you're a second-round draft pick. You better either be an elite pass rush specialist, or you got to start playing some significant snaps. So, and I know we're talking about this year's draft, but that high of a pick, it wasn't like he did much last year. So there's still a lot of hope that he can turn into the type of player that they thought when they picked him in the second round.
The hope is dwindling. The fans are not all that hopeful at this point. Because he really did struggle. Like, there wasn't much at all to speak of last year. They had the joint practice against the Cowboys. He tore him apart. I think it was 3-4 sacks. He was unstoppable. But that's the only time he popped during training camp. He didn't really pop during the preseason. Didn't really pop during the regular season. He struggles to set the edge. He's a little bit smaller, but the bigger issue is just that he doesn't quite. It didn't look like he knew where he was supposed to be. Okay. So runs would just bounce outside because he wasn't even trying to set the edge. So the size didn't even really come into play because he didn't get to that point where he had to hold a guy up. As a pass rusher, again, you see occasionally like the burst off the line, but he rarely got around guys. I guess it's not a good pick at this point. You barely even saw him on the field last year.
He was a rookie, so.
Exactly. And so he could pop in year 2. There's room for him if he can turn into a real edge threat on pass rushing downs. The door is wide open. Yeah. Baron Browning, they're excited about the tools and stuff, but he hasn't put up any numbers that would prohibit Nick Benito from jumping in front of him. There's just really nothing to look at except for the fact that he was a second-round pick that makes you think he's going to make that happen.
All right. So, in a way that the linebacking core looks right now? Are they also set? Because it looks like to me, like you said, you got Jewell and Singleton inside. So now you have Sanders as like the three, and on the edge, you're gonna have to count on Benito. But that is the one thing that the team did not really do besides Sanders, because Sanders, again, we're still not sure how he best fits in. But I get the feeling when it's all said and done, he's probably going to be better. I think when his career is done, he's probably going to be looked at more of as an edge rusher than an inside linebacker.
I think. And that's just what jumps out.
Yes.
Even if he's equal, if he's just as good on first and second down, playing off the ball, dropping in coverage, doing those sorts of things, which he did well at Arkansas and looked really good in minicamp. He actually picked off a pass just to the flat. It was just so fast he was able to undercut it. But even if you're making those plays on first and second downs and also getting to the quarterback on third downs, people are going to remember the sacks. Like that's just worth so much more.
So really, the depth, though, unfortunately, doesn't look like it's there yet unless these two young kids step it up as far as the edge department, because, again, that was something that we really thought could very well end up as one of their top picks, but it really kind of did with Sanders. So you don't have a first-round draft pick, so it's kind of hard to find these guys. But they felt Mims and that wide receiver position was more valuable based on what they were looking for, which again kind of leads me to believe if you're going to trade up for Mims and you've got some issues in other spots on the team, I don't know. I don't look at it as there's any way that they anticipate having Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy here very long together.
Yeah. We were talking about on the podcast before, we have the pre-draft press conference and Sean Payton and George Payton over and over and over again just say, yep, we're going best player available, best player available, best player available, best player. And they say that every year, and you say, okay, sure you are. And then push comes to shove, and you need a tackle, and you draft a tackle. But you look through their draft picks, and they really did go best player available. They drafted a receiver when that was probably the bottom of the list of needs.
And they traded up to get him.
Exactly. And if they say, yeah, we thought he was a top 20 pick.
Okay.
To take your swing, why not? And I will say about the outside linebackers, the depth, you have Jonathan Cooper there, who's a 7th-round pick a couple years ago, but in 2 seasons he started 14 games. Like he's solid. Okay. Aaron Patrick made the team last year as a core special teamer, tore his ACL. Chris Allen, he was their big money undrafted free agent.
Remember that? Yep.
Yeah, so he was the SEC tackle for loss leader in that would have been 2020. Then missed the 2021 season with a foot injury, wasn't ready to go last year because of the same foot injury, Liz Frank injury. And so now you're seeing him for the first time. Could he pop from Bama? I think the highest paid pass rusher or highest paid undrafted free agent this year is Thomas Incoom. So you see what they're trying to do there. There just isn't – they're banking on long shots hitting. And so they have like their 3 or 4 swings. We'll see if it works.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, at this point, that's what you got to do. When you make all those, when you make the big trade and you give up a lot for that particular player and Russell Wilson, this is what happens. A lot of other areas of the team have to suffer for at least the short term. Okay, so defensive backfield. This is where they add the 2 players. Riley Moss, you mentioned they traded up for him. You mentioned special teams with Patrick. And Moss will definitely be a part of special teams. He's a good special teamer. But that's not why they drafted him. He is, a guy with a high motor, excellent football IQ, is really what you're looking for from one of those Iowa fundamentally sound, tacklers. I like the pick. What did you think about the need overall, and how quickly is he going to become relevant?
That's a good question. So I thought there was a need there at cornerback for sure, but I thought it was a need that I would have filled probably with a veteran. Okay. Somebody who you can say, Damari Mathis, he played well as a rookie. You want to see him as a starter again this year because it looks like you might really have something there. Or at least there's the potential for it, and so you gotta see what he can do, and that's why I would have gone out and found, I don't know what name to throw out there, but somebody who's played some football, and if you need somebody on the boundary to jump in because Damari Mathis can't hold it up, I thought that would make a lot of sense just to have somebody you can plug in there. Instead, they went the rookie route
Another
with
young
Riley
guy.
Moss.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like you said, there are some veteran qualities there in terms of the IQ and the way he understands the game. Because again, like you said, coming out of Iowa, they play all that zone defense. He's had his eyes on the quarterback for the entire time he played at Iowa, which makes you wonder a little bit about the man coverage skills, just because he was never really asked to do that. But he's got plenty of speed. He can run with guys on the boundary. He's very physical. He's great in the run game. And honestly, there's a real chance he beats out Damari Mathis.
Sure.
I wouldn't bet on it just because Damari played so well last year after the nightmare start, which I guess you can't really ignore. But yeah, I think that there's a good chance that he's kind of your third option, Riley Moss is, as a boundary corner, with an outside chance that Tremont Smith can kind of take that role or is more prepared for that role just because he's been in the NFL so long.
Who would be considered like the backup nickel right now?
I think it's Isang Bassi.
Is that a good thing?
As a backup, it's fine.
Okay.
As a backup, it's
All
fine.
right.
Like you can get away with it. He played his best football of his career last year. Kind of a grinder in the slot. Doesn't have the physical tools, but that isn't holding him back in the way that it did early in his career. And so if you need to put him out there, he's worthy of a roster spot.
Okay.
He can play special teams, but if he doesn't get one, you wouldn't be too surprised. I also think, though, that if they got into a situation where they needed a third corner, you might just consider putting Damari Mathis and Riley Moss out there and taking your pick. Maybe even Pat Surtain plays in the slot. Like if you're playing the Raiders and they've got Devontae Adams in there, maybe that's the plan. So I do think it's more likely if they went to the backup slot, they would just ignore that it's the slot and play their third best corner.
And then they also have the kid McMillan, who had a good college career.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, he had a good college career. I think he was practice squad all year. Didn't see the field until the last game of the season against the Chargers, and he actually started that game. And Keenan Allen beat him a couple times, so that's a thing that's going to happen to a rookie. There were some great plays, though. There were enough plays where people should be excited to see him. And Art Green, too. Art Green coming out of Houston, he should have been drafted, I think.
Okay.
4.35 speed, I think 6'1", 200 pounds. You turn on the highlight tape, like you get on YouTube and just look at Art Green highlights, and you're like, oh my goodness, how is this guy? He's undercutting routes when the other guy has a 2-3 step advantage and getting picks. And then it just turns out it's like a 48-second highlight video because there just weren't enough of them.
Right.
So the tools are there, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a way onto the roster too.
Okay. And then at safety, we mentioned Skinner. Mm-hmm. Very surprised because he has a unique kind of skill set. He's that really tall, and I know Arled's kind of brought out maybe what should be an interesting comparison in Kyle Hamilton, who was a first-round draft pick out of Notre Dame last year and had a tremendous rookie season for the Ravens. But that's what kind of Skinner can remind you of, because he's got that very unique height and length for that position. And he even made some plays, as far as ball skills, key interceptions this past season. He's got the physical game to him. I don't understand why he dropped. I have no idea why he dropped, but Denver was able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, he tore the pec before the combine, but they said he should be good to go before training camp. So it's not like that's a long-term injury. Like maybe that drops you around, but it shouldn't have taken him all the way down to the 6th round. He's a freak. Like you just don't find prospects like that very often who are that big, that physical. He's one of those guys who you watch him play in college and just think he's a man among boys.
Yes.
Like, of course, things go well for him. He's a varsity player playing JV football in the Mountain West. And because of that, I think he might be a little bit raw just because, it's easy for him. You don't have to ask him to do a lot. We actually had Boise State's defensive coordinator on the show a couple days ago, and he was telling us that when they're game planning every week, kind of the first thing you do is just say, okay, where do we want to put JL Skinner this week? Where can he be most impactful? because you can teach him anything and he'll pick it up in 2 or 3 days and he'll be good to go on Saturdays, I guess at that point, Sundays now. So because of that, probably not the most polished, but just so physical, such a playmaker. And the other comp, I love the Kyle Hamilton comp. And Cam Chancellor, that's a big comparison. If he gets to that level,
Sure.
you hit that 1% outcome. But I mean, that's the guy who JL always brings up. Like, you go back and read what he's saying in high school. It's like, I just can't stop watching Cam Chancellor highlights all through college. Cam Chancellor, like top 5 Cam Chancellor plays. Here's what they are. I'm trying to be that. He goes to the Senior Bowl. And at the end of the week, Jim Nagy's talking about him and says, he actually kind of reminds me of Cam Chancellor. And so then JL goes out there and says, no way, he actually said that about me. Like, it's crazy. But that's the other
There you go.
mold. I mean, maybe not comp, but mold that you're trying to fill with him.
Well, and now with Kareem Jackson, his days are numbered, and I know we talked about Stearns possibly winning that job, and maybe he does. There'll be some. I mean, as long as Jackson's there, I'm sure he's going to get the starters reps. But now you've got 2 late round safeties also in that mix, including Turner Yell, who was drafted last year. So that's the hope, that both Turner Yell and Skinner can compete with Stearns to try and unseat Jackson.
Yeah, and I think PJ Locke, he was ahead of Delarian Turner Yell last year. Who knows? Maybe a great offseason that kind of flipped. But PJ Locke, a couple good plays. Again, you're looking at back of the roster, competing for a spot. But Turner Yell is also in that same position, kind of competing for a spot. And there might be a role on defense. And to go back to the nickel corner thing, having this many safeties factors in there as well.
Yes.
Kareem Jackson was a cornerback when he was in Houston, comes to Denver, plays safety.
There you
go. If they're going to, I would imagine, try to get 3 safeties on the field in situations. And so if you're looking at backup slot, why not give Caden Stearns a couple reps there? Why not give Kareem Jackson a couple reps there? Obviously, you treat the position a little bit differently. You go zone heavy, whatever you need to do. It's a different look, but I do think that they'll find ways to play all these guys this year.
And then finally, nothing happened along the defensive front, except, of course, we talked about Lancaster. Thought in the beginning, as far as needs, that this was one that Denver could have looked at for sure, but they decided, because even so far, Lancaster is the only new face along the defensive line that I see since the time we spoke. The Allen addition is a nice one, but I think a lot of it's going to depend on Awuzurike and his development in year 2. Correct?
Oh, I mean that's huge. It's kind of crazy because in Denver, of course, Awuzurike is kind of seen as a disappointment. He's a 4th round pick. He isn't on the field all that much. He actually made a couple plays late in the season. No, not like sacks or anything, but a couple pressures are like, okay, I see what you're trying to do there. But around here, he's kind of seen as that, we'll see if it ever happens for him. But that is true, and I hadn't thought of it that way, that really you're going to the season, he's probably your 6th, 7th defensive lineman based on expectations, based on what we saw last year. But the talent is there. Those quick feet, and he's so big and so strong that maybe just one more year in the weight room, this one offseason is enough to unlock him. Because if he does turn out to be, maybe your 3rd best defensive lineman behind DJ Jones and Zach Allen, then this could be a really good group. Matt Henningsen outplayed him, 7th rounder. What's his ceiling? Who knows? But if Awuzurike does pop this year, then I think you have to like the starting 3, but then you also feel pretty good about the 3 guys in the rotation behind him too.
Yeah, because Henningsen and Wattenberg, those are like head-scratching moves last year, weren't they? In the 5th and 6th round, I'm not sure the fan base understood those moves. Nothing has changed anybody's mind, but there has to be a plan, and that's why you have to be patient. Maybe these guys are on track. Maybe they're going to be, the type of players that the Payton and the scouts thought that they would be. It's not going to happen overnight. So
definitely. And the other thing is, 3-4 defense, you need 3 of those guys out there, but also you play so much nickel that all of a sudden you only need 2 out there for a bunch of those snaps. Like I said, if you want to try to play that big nickel, then maybe you can get away with it against occasional 12 personnel, 21 personnel. You could at least try it. Maybe you go lighter up front, pull Kareem Jackson down in the box. So I do think that there's a lot of different ways that they can kind of build this defense because you do have a Drew Sanders and because you do have, these three safeties that I'm curious to see what Vance Joseph puts together.
Well, before I let you go, let's talk about those undrafted free agents. You mentioned a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
Pelzuski from Illinois and Art Green
Mm-hmm.
in the defensive backfield. So
Mm-hmm.
are there any other free agents, undrafted free agents that we need to keep an eye
on? I think so. Maybe not in terms of money.
Okay.
That they're making in terms of guarantees,
sure.
But in terms of just like path to a roster spot, Jaleel McLaughlin might be the best bet to make the team. I believe NCAA's all-time leading rusher out of Youngstown State. So it's a little bit different there. But he has the speed to be a home run hitter. And we've seen the undersized, speedy guys pop under Sean Payton. So the fact that they were able to bring him in definitely means something. And as a running back, again, we talked about it. Tony Jones Jr. right now is your number 3.
Yeah.
You can beat him out. That is definitely possible. Then you throw in, is Javonte Williams even ready week 1? So is there, another spot that's open? Could there even be one beyond that? It's possible.
Okay.
So I do think that's one definitely to keep an eye on. Outside of that, I mentioned Palszewski, who I think he might be really good. He's played a lot of football, but also Henry Bird from Princeton, played left tackle, probably you'd imagine moving into guard. He got a lot of guaranteed money, which always means you keep an eye on him. Long-time starter, 2-time first team, Ivy League, all Ivy League. I think there's some crazy stats about he didn't give up a sack in however long. But again, it's him playing against Ivy League competition. Yeah. So you have to see if it translates. I'll throw one more in. How about PJ Mustafer? Nose tackle from Penn State. Another one, decent payday. Looked good for sure. One of the stars of rookie minicamp, which again, it's one football practice, so what's that worth? But if they keep Tyler Lancaster, they'd save about $2.6 million versus saving Mike Purcell or keeping him on the roster.
True.
Maybe you look at PJ Mustafer and say, well, we can save even more. And look, he's younger. So I think that he also has not an easy path to the roster, but a path that is possible.
Okay, cool. Those are top 5 undrafted free agents to keep an eye on. By the way, Bird, did he play guard in the Ivy League, or did he play tackle and he's moving inside to guard?
I think he was tackle.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he was tackle. Maybe he had a little bit of guard as well. But I was pretty sure he was their left tackle there.
Okay. And what did he play? Did you say Princeton?
Yes, Princeton. Okay. Yeah, and I just pulled it up. So 2019 started at left tackle.
Got it.
And I'd imagine they kept him there because he kept putting up all Ivy League seasons.
Excellent. All right.
Yep.
By the way, I'm going to show everybody here. I know you can't see me, Henry, but this is the draft guide for 2023. Yes. And even though the draft is over, this is still a perfect time to pick up the guide because now you know where all these players in this guide, you know which teams they're on. And we've got the scouting reports on all of them. The draft review guide will be out in June. So the Denver Broncos are one of 11 teams that I'm going to be writing about. Obviously, this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, Henry. So today's the day I was going over because our deadline's in about 2 weeks, and I was ready to pick a team out of my teams. All right, who am I going to pick today to do? And I go, well, of course, I got to pick Denver. Why not? It'd be fresh in my mind after a conversation with Henry, and I could put my my observations in for how Denver did in the draft. So anyway, you can check out the draft review guide at ourlads.com. Well, by the way, we're going to have PDFs available too, so you can give those away. And we'll have a hard copy to send out to you again, Henry, and appreciate the work you've done here for us. And we also look forward to talking to you again before the preseason, before training camp, so we can find out how things are going after the offseason and all the excitement getting ready for 2023.
Yeah, definitely. Just let me know and I'll be there.
Will do. And again, it's every day on YouTube, right? It's a DNVR Sports YouTube channel. Did I lose you, Henry? I think I lost Henry. Yep. Did Henry drop out? Did Henry think that was me saying goodbye? You there, Henry? I don't know. I guess I lost Henry. All right. Anyway, peace out, Henry. So we'll talk to Henry again once training camp and the preseason kicks off. And don't forget to check out the channel for all the other team videos because we have 32 post-draft videos that are going to be available. We're posting them every few days, things of that nature on the channel. And we will be talking about the Denver Broncos with Henry. And by the way, you can check out the DNVR. We have it on the ticker throughout this interview, the DNVR YouTube channel. So check that out. It's not just for the Broncos, it's for all of Denver sports. And once again, we appreciate Henry's time here on the show. Our next interview is going to be, we have 2 more to go this week. Atlanta with Kevin Knight from the Falcoholic. That's going to be on Thursday. And then I'm going to interview Jeff Risdon, who covers the Detroit Lions. That is going to be on Friday. And that's going to wrap up my personal 11 teams that I have responsible for on the Ourlads draft guide. And then we'll start getting into other teams and other interviews and such. Probably actually take a little bit of a break too, but still a lot of other fantasy news to talk about. We're going to be getting into that with Draft Sharks, so stay tuned for that. We're putting a Dynasty League together, so there's a lot of talk on the rookies, and keep an eye on those guys for your Dynasty drafts. So all that stuff is still coming up over the next month or two before we really get into the heat of what's going to take place for preseason 2023. So thanks again for checking us out. Make sure to subscribe. And if you like what you see, definitely click the like button and hopefully share the video as well. We'll see you next time here on the Ourlads Football Network.